Hi, and welcome to Leap, a podcast series by Startuplifers. Startuplifers is a not for profit organization that connects emerging talent from the Nordics with startup jobs in the San Francisco Bay Area and elsewhere. With this second season, we're focusing on remote work and how Startuplifers has made it possible for our guests. I'm your host, Pauliina Alanen, and today I have the pleasure to be here with my friend Federico Fiorini. Federico is now doing software engineering at Webflow remotely from Finland. But prior to that, he was living as a digital nomad, traveling all around the world and also living in San Francisco through Startuplifers. So, welcome to the show, Federico.
Hi, Paulina, and thanks for having me.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself first? So, who are you and what do you do now?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Federico. I'm originally from Italy, and I have a technical background. So I studied computer science in my bachelor's in Italy, and then I moved to Finland a few years ago to study for my master's. I did this double degree. So I studied in Aalto University for 1 year. And then fast forward 4 years, now I am a senior software engineer, tech leading the product growth team at Webflow. So for the people that don't really know what Webflow is about, or I never heard of Webflow before, so Webflow is a high growth tech company in the no code industry. Basically, we provide this software as a service tool that provides a visual interface to web development with the goal to enable everybody to build for the web. And what I'm doing is I'm an engineer in product growth. And basically, I'm working on different initiatives to improve growth metrics such as activation, monetization, and retention through A/B testing and experimentation. And yeah, so I've been at Webflow for the past 3 years.
All right. So, you and we met, I think, in 2017 or 2018 in San Francisco. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Summer 2017. That's when I moved to San Francisco.
Yeah, that's right. And I was there just a bit before for you, like half a year or something like that. So let's go back a little bit in history and kind of to that time when you heard about Startuplifers. So how did you end up applying for Startuplifers, moving all the way to San Francisco, and what did you do there?
Yeah. So as I said, I was studying in Aalto, and I heard about Startuplifers when I was there. It was a bit hard to miss. I think they were in many events and kind of sponsoring what they were doing. And basically, I as soon as I heard about the program, I decided to apply. I always wanted to go to California, Silicon Valley. So it was a great opportunity for me to go. And so I had already some working experience as a software engineer before my master's. So I think that helped with my application. And after a while, I got an offer from a company which was not Webflow. Actually, I started at this very small startup called Seeds. Um, and I went through the interviewing process with them, which was actually pretty simple at that point. So I was still in Finland. I was interviewing with them, and it was a very small startup, like just 2 3 people. So I only to talk to the CEO a couple of times, and I didn't really have a technical interview. But she had hired previous startup lifers before, so I think that was probably easier to get a job at a company that already had experience these. And to be honest, I also think she was a bit after cheap labor, but I didn't really care at that point. I really wanted to go to San Francisco, to Silicon Valley, and I got an offer, and I just went.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great opportunity to move to another side of the world and the kind of tech mecca. Like you said, you had always been interested in working in the region. So, as I remember, it was pretty interesting, this company where you worked at. So, quite small. Could you describe that a little bit and kind of how you ended up changing then?
Yeah. So as I said, I moved to San Francisco in the summer of 2017, and the company was a very small startup, 2 3 people. led by a non-technical CEO, and basically ended up being the only engineer at the company, which I didn't really expect. There wasn't there was supposed to be other engineers, um, and that became kind of both interesting and like lots of responsibilities as well as stressful. I was initially hired to build this recommendation system, um, which was what I had been working on my master thesis, but then I ended up doing like much different things. And basically, like 2 months into the job, we created our own cryptocurrency and we ICO'd. So we
Oh,
did this initial coin offering. Yes, there was the boom of all companies ICOing in 2017,
oh yeah,
and
that's right. The great
yeah,
peak.
exactly. It was a pretty cool experience. I had never worked in with blockchain or crypto before, so I did not know the industry nor the tech stack. But basically, in a month, I ended up building our own currency and the site where we sold it. Um, so definitely was interesting and pretty cool experience, as well as very stressful and time consuming. I was working weekends. Definitely like it wasn't a very balanced experience in those first few months, but it was pretty cool. I think I was probably one of the first few people in the world, I would say, at that point that had created their own cryptocurrency and sold it, like from a technical perspective, right? Very few companies had done it since then.
Yeah, you're probably right about that, and really like at least this is sounds like an unexpected outcome of your first couple of months with startup lifers.
Exactly. um, but then, like basically, like 4 or 5 months into the job, a month after the ICO, like things didn't go as expected. It didn't really. It wasn't really like a good outcome of this ICO, and basically we ran out of money, and everyone got laid off. So
Yeah.
this like roller coaster, like you arrive there and like you get like so much responsibilities and you get to build these crazy things, and then you're just like a week after you're laid off. So that's
It's
the
crazy.
startup life. Yeah,
Yeah, like accelerated startup experience on steroids or something.
exactly.
So how did you then end up switching to Webflow?
hmm Um, yeah, so basically, when that happened, I had technically I had 30 days to find a job, even though we ended up in good relationship with the other startup, at least at that time. Um, and then basically we like my official ending date like didn't happen until I already had found a job, so I wasn't really too stressed about the timing of finding a job. I ended up applying to a bunch of companies on my own, and I had a few interviews with some of them, and then also through Startuplifers. So Startuplifers put me in contact with a few companies. One of them was Webflow. um, for other companies, it was a little bit hard for me actually to um, like my visa situation. I was there like everybody else with an internship visa, this J1 visa, and especially many startups that I never hired like with these kind of visas before don't really know what is the process. So it was a bit. I got rejected by a couple of places because specifically because of that. But then Webflow had already hired people through Startuplifers. I think they already had two, and they hired great engineers through the program. So they had this trust also with the program. So it was pretty easy for me to get an offer from the company because again the interview process was kind of smooth. I interviewed with the CEO and with the CTO, and then I got offered to do a trial week where they hired me as a contractor for a week, and I got to work with the team. And then they were happy with me, I was happy with them, and they decided to hire me,
Hmm.
and that's how I
Okay.
switched to Webflow.
Sounds great. Is that trial week something Webflow does on a regular basis?
Yes, that's something we used to do. We don't anymore. But we used to do a trial week for everybody, or maybe either a week or a few days. But anyway, a trial project for people to work on. a paid with paid time. So it used to be, I think, 40 hours, and then it went down to 20. And nowadays we don't do it anymore because with the scale that we are at the company, that's a lot of time. Um, but yeah, it's something that used to be pretty common.
Yeah. So Webflow is a remote first company, but when you started there, you actually worked from the SF office for the first year. So could you tell us a little bit about the way you transitioned after that year, after your visa expired to be remote, but still continue to work for Webflow, and kind of how this whole process unfolded for you?
Yes. You what you said is right. Webflow is a remote first company, and this like pre-pandemic, right? Pre-COVID. So remote first meant that we still have an office in San Francisco where approximately 30% of the people will be, and then we had a bunch of remote people. So everybody else, 70%, will be remote, mostly in the US, but many also. We had a bunch of people from Europe as well and South America. um, and when I joined, it was still a pretty small team. We were like 50 people, so I got actually the chance to get to know everybody, right? So I was there in for a full year, and I saw the company growing from 50 to 100, but still I got the chance to work with the people and to build these relationships, these personal relationships, to build trust and accountability, right? So when I transitioned, it was actually pretty smooth. Um, so because of this trust and because of these relationships, to me it was pretty simple to transition remote. And then obviously being having this remote culture, strong remote culture helped. We already had all the processes optimized to be inclusive of remote workers, right? um, all the things that companies do nowadays, and they had to adjust due to the COVID pandemic. We already had them in place. So all the meetings online and all the decisions and conversations documented, all the status updates on Slack, async, and so on. All these things that nowadays are pretty common. We had them already in place.
Yeah, did it feel weird to you at the time to have this remote first culture, or was it like, since you had already been working in tech, was it something that you viewed as a natural step?
I think it was a natural step. Yes. Again, having started at the office first helped a lot. I think like if I had started remotely, like 100% remotely at the beginning, would have been probably a bit harder. But like that transition, because I had never worked completely remote before, but that transition period was pretty simple, again because of that personal relationship that I had built.
Yeah. And how many people are you now at Webflow?
I think now we are 260.
Okay. So yeah, you have been growing quite significantly since you started and you were only 50.
Yes, we did.
So what kind of remote practices then do you have? You said you already were like one of the first companies prior to COVID that had this remote first culture.
Mhm.
Could you like name some good practices that Webflow has incorporated into your working culture and that you would like to highlight here as like examples of good remote work practices?
Yes, totally. Well, first of all, the goal is, besides all those processes that I mentioned earlier, right, to get work done, but also the other goal is to build and to keep a strong culture, right, and build these personal relationships, and team building, even which is very hard when the team is distributed. So Buffalo, the first thing is they fly all the people to San Francisco for each quarter visits, right? It used to be once a quarter, but now with the scale of the team, with the team being much larger, it's not sustainable anymore. So at the moment, or at least pre-pandemic, and they're probably going to resume after the pandemic, it's going to be only like after being hired. So after being hired, fly to San Francisco, get to hang out with the team at the office for a week. So everybody gets the chance to meet people in person. So that's one thing. Then we have these yearly retreats. So for the whole company flies and spends a week together in some locations. Like we went to Portugal, we went to Mexico, we were going to Canada like last year, but then obviously we COVID, we couldn't go. Um, but these yearly retreats are something very important to keep this culture, because at least once a year you get to hang out with the whole team, right? And we these retreats are usually to like maybe the founders would kind of expose kind of different company goals, and as well as a lot of team building activities and so on. And then one more thing is that we have also team offsites. So and not all the company can always meet, especially with the team scaling so much. So individual teams like the marketing team or the customer support team, or our product growth team with an offsite, for example, last year. So individual team will go and spend a few days together. Yeah, so the goal basically is to get people um, to meet and build these relationships. Something else we are doing now is also more like Zoom things. So these all these kind of games and team building activities over Zoom. Something that we had to kind of adjust with the pandemic. And yeah.
All right. So you moved out of San Francisco then in early 2019, so just a year before COVID hit. So you had a year, a full year to travel, working and traveling mostly as a digital nomad. Could you tell us a little bit more about these travels? Like, where did you go and who did you travel with?
Yeah. So basically, I moved out of SEF in February 2019 because my visa expired, and I decided to go full digital nomad and travel. Right. That was something that the flexibility of the remote job like could allow me to do, and I really took that chance. So I've been to a bunch of different countries. I traveled in Asia. I was in Thailand, Taiwan, Hong Kong, South Korea, Bali, and counting. And South America, I was in Mexico, Colombia, and then South Africa. And I spent some time back at home in Italy. So a lot of different places. Some places I was for a very short time, even just like a week, and other places for a longer time, even like 2 months. And yeah, so basically, I really embrace this digital nomad lifestyle of working and traveling. Um, I I I traveled solo sometimes, and other times I travel with a community of other digital nomads.
Did you then, through these travels, or even prior to that, when you were planning to travel and work, did you discover some digital nomad communities or services that you could share with the podcast listeners? So I think there are things like that help you with accommodation or like finding a workspace in some of these countries, like you mentioned Bali or Colombia. Like I wouldn't know like where to find a reliable internet connection necessarily in all these places. So could you share some of those, like what you found out?
Yes. Well, digital nomading it's become pretty big in the last few years, right? And there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of destinations very hot for digital nomads. So obviously, like many services started arising because of that. Um, one service that I really used a lot, and this company and this community I travel with is called Hacker Paradise, and
Mm-hmm.
basically they are a service for digital nomads, and they organize trips all over the world for example, they will go for 2 months in Cape Town or 2 months in Thailand, and then you can join them for as many weeks as you want, right? So it's very flexible, and they provide accommodation, co-working space, they organize events, and more importantly, they provide community, right? So you are with a group of 15 to 30 people, all like-minded from all over the world, working in different industries, even though many are working in tech, and everyone with this passion for traveling and exploring. And there's no really expectations to be with the group all the time, so there's really also room for introverts. So it's really something that I recommend, like finding these communities. There's many services and many other companies doing like similar things. For example, there is one called Remote Year, and with them you will go for a full year, with the same group of people, I think like 15, 20 people in 12 different locations, so you will move every month to a different location.
Whoa.
And yeah, so there's a lot of different services, a lot of different communities, for digital nomads for sure. But then also when I was traveling solo, there are different opportunities there too. And for example, there's a lot of co-living and co-working spaces, where they, for example, offer rooms, and accommodations, and also a co-working space. Um, and they also organize events, and things, so you can actually meet the people that are there. So I was in such a place, for example, in Bali for a couple of months.
It sounds like there was a very vivid kind of remote work and digital nomad community already prior to COVID, but maybe after now all the companies are used to remote work, it might actually boom quite significantly after we can start traveling again, or at least that's
Yes.
kind of how I feel like we have been pushing our travel hopes for more than a year, and we can now work remotely, or many of us can, or even those that prior to COVID didn't have the opportunity yet. So it might affect this industry quite a bit.
Yes, yes, totally. I think it's a huge thing, and especially with now with COVID, and more people going remote, and more people even missing traveling. I think after the pandemic, probably even much more people are going to try this digital nomad thing.
Yeah, and even in this podcast, we had just before you, we had a guest, Emily Ingola, who works for Safety Wing, which is a company that does services for
Hmm.
digital nomads, things like social security or pension related things that you
Hmm.
usually would get from your like home country. But
Yeah,
then if you don't really stay in a country for long enough, then you don't ever get these services. So there are
yeah.
different opportunities. It's really interesting where that will develop. During your travels, how did you meet new people, or did you get some new friends?
Yeah, I mean, many, right? You meet a lot of people. That's the thing. That's for sure. Many are just acquaintances, right? Like you, especially when you're solo traveling, I think you get to meet many people. Um, but maybe it's a bit harder to be like to meet closer friends. I got to meet closer friends when I was with Hacker Paradise, with that community, especially because you are in a community, you are in a group. Some people I met in my very first trip in Taiwan, I then met them again like a few months later in another trip in Cape Town, and then we also plan to travel together again. Um, so you do have a chance to also build like longer friendships, but obviously, like due to the nature of this lifestyle, especially when you're fast traveling, then it's harder to build these long relationships, but definitely you get to meet a lot of cool and interesting people.
How would you describe overall the experience of traveling and working, like combining these two? How slowly, for instance, did you have to travel, and was it then easier to stay longer? You mentioned you stayed even 2 months at some locations. So, how did you feel like? What's enough time to be spent at one spot, or like combining this travel and work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So especially at the beginning, you have this excitement, right? And you want to see everything, and you jump from place to place, um, up until a point where it gets tiring, and you realize that, wait a minute, this is not a vacation. Like this is my lifestyle. This is how my life looks like right now. So you have to find some balance. Um, Especially at first, at the beginning, I was staying some places even just for a week or 2 weeks, and jumping from place to place. But then I realized that this is way too short. So imagine you're working on weekdays, right? And then on the weekends you want to explore, because especially if you're staying just a week or 2 weeks, you have very limited time to get to explore the place you are. And this means that it becomes very tiring very soon, because at some point, you want to just relax, to rest. And you start even losing interest in exploring. At some point everything becomes meh. I think this weekend I'm just gonna rest. So finding this balance is very important. And I think having this longer staying in like for 1 to 3 months helps a lot in having this balance, and in also being able to build these stronger relationships.
Then how about the downsides of traveling and working?
Yeah, there are downsides, especially on the working side, right? I mean, traveling is fun, but when you gotta work, right? So time zone difference is the number one issue here. Sometimes I had as much as 16 hours of difference when I was in South Korea, with especially working with California. um, so you need to give some overlap with your team, right? You have some meetings, like that big time zone difference means late meetings. Sometimes I had meetings at 1 a.m. even. And you need to kind of arrange your schedule around those meetings, and around your work. um, and then especially when you're in a group, so you have meetings in the evening, and then people are going out for drinks or for dinner, for example. So you get that fear of missing out. um, and that becomes frustrating sometimes. um, I think it really depends also on the role you're in. I think if you are in a company as an individual contributor, like an engineer or a designer, or it's more doable. Also, if you're a freelancer and you manage your own clients, it's doable. If you're in a managing position, like a product manager or just people manager, it becomes pretty hard. And I will say it will be like almost impossible to actually enjoy the place you are, because like those positions require much more time usually. And then the other thing is that because of that, it becomes a bit harder to focus on career development. um, so in your free time, like if you're focusing, if you have a big goal of getting a promotion, for example, maybe in your free time you're studying or you're doing side projects. But now in your free time you are traveling and you are exploring and you are going surfing and you're going hiking. um, so definitely, like that needs to be your priority, enjoying that kind of lifestyle, and that goes on the expense of prioritizing career development.
Yeah, yeah, sounds like the time difference is definitely like something of a challenge, but then it's also like you said, it's a lifestyle. So then you just need to adjust your life and then maybe try to travel in places where you don't have that much of a time difference, or
Hmm.
then somehow like organize around that type of living, combining traveling and working at the same time.
Exactly.
Could you still tell us about like some very memorable trip that you had during your travels?
Yeah. I had a few. Probably my top one will be, so I was in Cape Town in South Africa, and we had this amazing safari in the Kruger National Park, in the north of South Africa. Uh, just offline for I think 4 or 5 days in nature, like really close contact with all these animals I'd never seen before. Um, yeah, that definitely was an experience I really enjoyed. But I also enjoyed, like for example, Bali was one of my favorite places. I was there for a month and a half, and there wasn't like maybe one memorable thing, but the whole experience was very memorable because I was going surfing almost like every other day, like surfing in the morning, working in the afternoon and evening, and then enjoying all the local food and getting to know some local people. I think that also was one of my top places I've been.
Yeah, sounds pretty amazing. And Cape Town is actually like if you think about Finland, it's I think it's in the same time zone even, so that would be a good a good
Yeah,
location to work from, and then
yeah.
have this safari on the weekend.
Totally, yes. And Cape Town is just a very great location for digital nomads. It's cheap, and the nature around is amazing. There's a lot of hikes. There's the ocean. Yeah, really recommend to go there.
Hmm, good tip. Um, then I have still one more question. I think we're approaching the end of this episode, but seems that Startuplifers kind of started this whole adventure and journey for you when you first moved from Finland to San Francisco, then worked from there for a year, and then started this digital nomad life, and eventually ended up having this like home base in Finland. So imagine now you would be talking to somebody who is considering applying for Startuplifers. So do you have any like tips, or what would you like to say to our listeners who are thinking of applying but perhaps haven't done so yet?
Yeah. Well, the first tip is just apply. I totally recommend it. If you get the chance to go to San Francisco, just go. We'll be talking about remote work, and it's great, but definitely that like experiencing life in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, it's awesome, right? It's a very great opportunity, especially post pandemic. Is going to be even more. You've been there, you know what I'm talking about, the networking you can do there, the experiences, the nature, everything is a very good life experience. So definitely that will be the first tip. If you get a chance to go to SF, just go. um, but even if you don't and you end up starting remotely, I think that's great as well, right? Especially now in COVID time, when everybody is remote. So all the companies are nowadays adjusted to those remote processes that they might not had like 2 years ago. So I think now it's definitely a good time to start remotely, and then again it's a very good opportunity also career wise, right? um, First of all, you're building this network, this global network, so you're exposed to much more opportunities. Once you land a job with a US company, then it's much easier to get into that market and to possibly find more. Like you start getting visibility on LinkedIn and recruiters contacting you, and you're suddenly exposed to a much larger network. And even if at the end, like working remotely doesn't really apply and doesn't really work for you, it's still a great opportunity to build a strong CV, right? So you can then land a better job back home. So in short, really like totally recommend applying.
Yeah, well, thank you, Federico, for making this show today. I think it's been really interesting to hear about your adventures, and hopefully many of our listeners decide to apply based on your tip, and also to perhaps get to live a little bit this digital nomad life. So that's it for Leap this time. Thank you for listening. And once more, thank you, Federico. If you want to hear more stories about remote work, you can listen to the second season of this podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to check out the startup jobs that we have available on our website, startuplifers.org. Thanks for listening. See you around.